I was here from June 96 until sometime in 97. It worked out to be about a year, a little over a year, like 15 months. So anything that happened after 97, I was not here during that time. You know, I followed it in the news, but I wasn't here to experience it. But then I came back again in 2000. Oh, that's what I forgot to tell you. I went to Russia, and then I went to Washington, and they sent me out to Kosovo. And I thought I was only going to be here for 2 weeks, but I really liked it, and I kind of fell in love with the place. So thankfully, when we opened up the office, the people from Washington were really impressed with the office that we got set up in 2 weeks. And they were really impressed with the event and the media coverage and how we did it. So they asked me if I would be willing to stay and run the office for the first year. And I said, well, I mean, why not? You know, it would be interesting. It's kind of boring to work in Washington, you know. So I said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. But can you give me something in return? And they said, well, what would you like? And I said, I'd like to go to Hamburg, and I'd like to work in Hamburg, Germany, you know, for my next assignment. And so they promised me that if I stayed in Kosovo for a year, they would send me to Hamburg, and I could learn German and everything. So we made that deal, and sure enough, at the end of the year, I transferred to Germany after studying German in Washington, and I spent the next 2 years in Hamburg. Now, during that time, that's when everything began to fall apart. And I watched, you know, the fighting escalate on TV. I was watching CNN every day in my office, seeing what was happening. And then when the NATO bombing campaign started, I said, I've got to go back to Kosovo. And so I curtailed my assignment. I cut it short, and I came back in 2000, in the year 2000. Now, at that point, it was over with, but it had just ended. So, you know, the place was a disaster. Ruins were everywhere. I drove up from Macedonia, and I remember seeing dead animals beside the road, like cows and things. You know, driving everywhere you drove, you know, like coming from Skopje up to Pristina, all the buildings, not all, but a lot of buildings were bombed. They were destroyed. You could just see disaster everywhere. So I came back in 2000. What was then the U.S. office had expanded kind of all over Dragadan. It had moved up to the top of the hill because my office was destroyed on the first night of the bombing campaign. A Serb tank, Serb army tank, pulled up in front of my office. The barrel cranked around to aim at the front door. A soldier popped out of the tank and told our Albanian guard, you need to go home. And he took down the American flag, folded it up, and left the building. He was the only one there. Everybody else had been evacuated at that point. And as I understand it, they then took a landmine, set it inside the door, and blew the building up. Now, the building was later repaired, and I think some NGO works in it now. I'm not sure. At least they were back then. But they destroyed the building. So after the bombing and the UN took over the administration of Kosovo, then we established a big presence here, as you well know. But you couldn't really build an embassy at that point. It takes several years to build an embassy because of all the security considerations and everything. So we ended up just getting a whole neighborhood at the top of Dragadan up near Film City. And we had, I don't know, 20 or 30 houses. It was like a couple of streets, and different offices were in different houses. And the big house up in the center was where the chief of mission was. And notice that I'm not saying ambassador, because we could not say ambassador until Kosovo became an independent country. So it was always the chief of mission. And we had a lot of people. I mean, it was dozens of people at that time, maybe even 100 or more. But of course, we had a lot of guards. We had a lot of local employees, both Albanian and Serbian, and a handful of others. We tried to have full language capability, especially in my office, which was public affairs. And it was vital that we be able to provide interpreters for all the meetings that were going to be held, to be able to produce press releases and materials in all the needed languages. And so we had a very diverse staff from day one. Excuse me. So as we proceeded to work, I was living in a house up there, and it was interesting for me because when I looked out the back window from my bedroom, I was looking down on what I later found out was the Faculty of Architecture for the University of Pristina, the parallel university. And I could look down into this unfinished building. It had no windows. It was just the concrete and the red bricks, that was all it was. But there was no glass. And the students were sitting on benches inside this unfinished building, bundled up in coats and hats and gloves during the winter, and they had their drawing boards and T-squares and everything. And I would just stand up there and watch this and think, my God, how can they want to study so much? And so anyway, back in 96 and 97, we did visit a number of different faculties. And that was where I first learned about the educational system here. And, seeing like the little kids, for primary and secondary schools where the children were studying in all the different houses and buildings and storefronts and the like. And then visiting the different faculties. I visited law and architecture and I think engineering and some others, to see, how students were studying. And that was when we first got the idea for starting an American university here. And I actually visited with Dr. Rugova back in, I think it was 97. And we developed a proposal for a university that would be teaching in English. It would be American style. We wanted it to be in English so that it could be integrated. Because I knew the Albanian kids would be happy to study in English, and the Serbian kids would also be happy to study in English, and that was probably the only way we could get them into the same classroom together. Albanian students were not going to learn Serbian to go to a Serbian university, and likewise the Serbian kids were not about to learn Albanian and go to an Albanian university. But if both groups had to suffer, they would do it together. As long as both groups were equally handicapped and both groups had to go through the struggle to learn English and both groups had to suffer together, then we could make it work. Then we could actually start to integrate, like a new generation. And that was the impetus behind doing a foreign language university in the beginning. But Dr. Rugova, who was an academic himself, understandably, he said, this is not the time to start it. And, there's just too much going on. We got too many other things happening. It'll be hard to get approvals, et cetera, et cetera. So we just set the idea aside at the time because it was just not the right time. So as soon as I came back after the year, in the year 2000, now we started thinking more seriously about starting a university because we had the capability of doing it. Under the UN administration, we knew we could get all the approvals we needed to start everything. It would not be a problem. But money was the issue. And, because it's not cheap to start a university, as you would expect. But we had started, I say we, the U.S. government had started an American university in Bulgaria, at Blagoevgrad. And it was a very good university. And in fact, the second chief of mission who came in, Ambassador John Menzies, and I say ambassador because he was already an ambassador from his previous assignment, and you keep the ambassador title for life. Okay, so we could legitimately call him Ambassador Menzies, like within the office, but in public, we always referred to him as the chief of mission. But Ambassador Menzies was the one who had started the American University of Bulgaria in Blagoevgrad. And so when he arrived in the second year, Chris Dell was my first ambassador, or my first chief of mission, but that was only for a year. And when I brought up the idea of an American university, as I remember, Chris Dell was like, yeah, good idea. Why not? You know, we don't have any money for it right now, but it's a nice idea. So, you know, let's keep it in mind. And then when Ambassador Menzies came, he thought it was a great idea, and he put me in touch with the president in Bulgaria, with the American University in Bulgaria. So I actually went to Blagoevgrad, and I saw the university, visited the campus there, talked to students, met with the president, and we invited them to come to Kosovo. When I say them, the president and his wife, because she also was part of the university. And they came to Kosovo. We met in the lobby of the Grand Hotel. That was the only hotel they could stay in at the time. And that's a whole other experience. But we met at the Grand Hotel, and what we initially agreed was that they would do a study to kind of figure out like a strategy for doing this. And initially we thought it might just be a branch of the university in Bulgaria. It would be like AUB in Kosovo. But after they, got into it and saw what was going to be needed, did a feasibility study, they figured it was really probably not going to work very well. So we ended up deciding to go on our own. So I needed some startup money. So I thought, naive that I was, I thought $100,000 would probably be enough to get things started. So I thought, well, where can we get $100,000? I knew I didn't have it in my budget, at the U.S. office, and I couldn't spend it like that anyway. So it was suggested that we go talk to Dr. Bukoshi. So I met with Dr. Bukoshi in his office here in town, and I pitched the idea of an American university to him. And his response was very positive. He said, yes, this is a great idea. We need to do this. And I asked him for $100,000, which I thought, oh my God, how do you ask for $100,000? And, but he said, let me think about it. And what I didn't realize was that I didn't even know about the existence of UFORC. But the reason he put me off was that he had to consult with UFORC and talk to the other people back in Germany and Switzerland to see, if they would do this. But then 2 weeks later, he asked me to come back to his office, and he said, we're ready to give you, I think the amount was $1.8 million. He said, this is all the money that's left in the fund. And if you had come to us a year earlier, we would have given you a lot more, because this is exactly what Kosovo needs. And I totally agreed with him, but to get that $1.8 million took some time, because a lot of it was in Switzerland, and there was all these laws and regulations around how NGOs could use their money and transferring it out of the country and stuff. And that was all done by Louis Sell, who was hired by AUK to kind of set up the university, because I could not actually do that much on a daily basis for getting the university going, because I had my other job. I was working for the U.S. office. So early on, we made the initial effort to set up the AUK Foundation. That was in New York. And they brought on a couple of people using that initial seed money that Dr. Bukoshi gave us, that UFORC gave us. And then we started thinking, okay, where can we find, buildings for the campus? Where can we find, a campus to put this? And at first we looked at a big tract of land in Ivalia out near Gračanica that the municipality was willing to give us, but it was completely undeveloped. So there were no roads, no water lines, no power, nothing. And it was going to be a hugely expensive project to get that going. So I came back to the municipality and explained the problem there, and they said, well, there's this other campus out near Gurmia. It's on the road to Gurmia on the left. It's used to be a tourism college, but it's heavily damaged now, and there's some refugees living in it and so forth. Let's go look at that, and maybe that could be suitable for you. So we go out there, and it was a wreck. I mean, an absolute disaster. The building, there was water leaking everywhere. The windows were blown out. I mean, there was a lot of damage from the war. And there were refugees living there, people who were homeless from villages, out in Kosovo and stuff. And, we couldn't just throw these people out in the street. But at least we had a piece of land with buildings, and this could become a campus. So then we thought, okay, where do we go from this in terms of turning this into a real college? And one of my staff members suggested Mr. Bejat Patsoli. And so I had a meeting with Mr. Patsoli. The first meeting was, I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but it was at the end of this building upstairs. And it's on the end of the building, kind of going around. There was a big restaurant up there. I met Mr. Patsoli there. They had blocked off a big section of the restaurant, so it was private and everything. And he loved the idea of setting up this university, and he was very enthusiastic about supporting it. And ultimately, what he agreed to do was to just completely rebuild and reconstruct that campus. And that's the campus that you now have for what became RIT Kosovo. Now, how did RIT get into it? Well, the State Department had a conference in Zagreb for public affairs officers that I had to go to. And that was my first visit to Zagreb, which I really enjoyed. But one of the guests at this reception was a man named Don Hudspeth, who was the head of RIT Dubrovnik, their Dubrovnik campus. And I didn't know anything about Dubrovnik, but in retrospect, I would love to go see Dubrovnik. But Don was there, and he and I just got to talking. And I said, we're starting up an American university in Kosovo. Maybe we could somehow partner with you. And he said, oh, you need to talk to Jim Myers. And he gave me Jim Myers' email address and phone number and everything in Rochester. He said, just talk to him and see if you can do something with RIT. So I wrote to Jim and told him all about this project, what we were trying to do, the support we were getting from the Kosovo government, from the private sector, from the political class, everybody. And Jim was very interested in trying to do something with us. So he came to visit Kosovo, saw what we were doing, and RIT agreed to get involved with AUK. So we set up AUK initially to have RIT as kind of a contractor administering the program, but then it grew into essentially a branch campus of RIT. Now you have to understand that in the United States, the Rochester Institute of Technology is a top university. It is a major university, has a global reputation, an amazing campus in upstate New York. It's one of the top engineering and technical schools. It's just, you couldn't have a better partner. And so I was just super excited that we might be able to have somebody like RIT working with us. And when Jim started talking about issuing RIT degrees here in Kosovo, and students being able to get their degree and having their academic program and all this stuff. Well, it seemed like the sky was the limit at that point. And so Jim got very involved. We put him in touch with all of the players and everybody. He helped identify, people to work with us. We had the foundation. And initially, the foundation had Akan Ismaili and Julieta Mushkalai, both of whom I'm sure you know. And they were my first employees at USOP. They both worked with me in my office. And they had actually started working for me back in '96. They were literally our first employees at the U.S. office, and because we only hired the best. And so they got involved in setting up the foundation and serving on the board and guiding the direction of AUK, along with other people, including some Albanian Americans, people from the diaspora. And it just took off and grew, and now you have a very successful American university here. And for me, that is by far the most important thing the U.S. office / U.S. embassy has been able to do in Kosovo. I think that is a permanent legacy of the U.S. presence in Kosovo, and ultimately it's going to make a bigger difference in the country than probably anything else, because you're generating a whole new class of college graduates, people who are fluent in English, who have critical thinking skills, who are able to function and work in teams at a very good level, who have public speaking skills, presentation skills, and they're able to interact with the rest of the world very well. And that's why an American university can play such a critical role in a country like this, coming out of war, coming out of conflict, coming out of, ethnic and social rupture. It can be an instrument of healing. And I hope in time AUK will have more students from minority communities in it, just so we can begin to rebuild or even build new networks between young people from the different ethnic groups. And if you look at the RIT network, there's an RIT campus in Prague, there's one in Dubrovnik, you've got the one here, they're talking about one in Albania now. And if you think about how this can integrate students in the Balkans, your Albanian students meet students in the Czech Republic. They do projects with students in Dubrovnik, with the Croatian students. And before you know it, you have these networks building across European countries that promote economic development, they promote trade, they promote business development, internationalizing, trade and everything. And of course, what is the language of international commerce? It's English. So, you have these students who have these skills, who are able to embrace and use all the current technologies, the new technologies, and put these things to work for Kosovo. And we've seen, graduates now are becoming ministers and ambassadors and, everything. And that is over the next several decades, over the next 2 or 3 generations, it's going to have a profound impact on the country. And again, that's why I think this is the best part of the American legacy. And it's being supported by the Albanian diaspora, by the Albanian community here. But I hope to see it also supported by people who are not Albanians. I would like to see it get support from American and European foundations, more support from governments. I'd like to see rich people in Belgrade provide scholarships for Kosovo's Serbs to go to AUK. I mean, that would be fantastic if something like that could happen. But in any case, as RIT Kosovo now, as we call it, is a branch campus. As RIT Kosovo grows over the coming years and develops more and more programs and, gets more degree options and more students go to Rochester to study or go to the other campuses, we're going to see the influence of AUK growing and growing and having a bigger and more positive impact on Kosovo in the years to come. And to me, that's exactly what we wanted it to do.
Yeah, it's a very good plan. I hope it will be something like that.
Well, as we say in Iraq, inshallah.
Inshallah.